Good morning to you all. In the last session, I gave a detailed note on the classification of risk groups recommended by WHO, the biosafety level requirement for each risk group. Then I did mention about the Nuremberg Code of 1947. In today's class, I will present few more concepts of biosafety and bioethics. In the last session, we understood the Nuremberg Code as ethical guidelines for biomedical research. In continuation of that, we have another ethical guidelines for biomedical research called as Declaration of Helsinki. The Declaration of Helsinki was adopted in June 1964, and so far it has undergone 6 revisions, with the latest revision, that is 7th revision, that happened in the year 2013, and it is the first significant effort by medical community to regulate the medical research, and it forms the basis of most subsequent documents. The Declaration of Helsinki follows the Code of Nuremberg, and it is reviewed by independent committee. Informed consent is mandatory. Research has to be performed by qualified individuals only. Then research benefits should be above the risks. That means benefit should exceed the risk. Risk should be very minimal, and the research benefit should be exceeding the level compared to the level of the risk. So if you look at the basic principles of the Declaration of Helsinki, it has to conform to accepted scientific principles. Whatever the experimental methods or the experimental design that is proposed to be conducted should conform to the accepted scientific principles. The design formulated should be thoroughly reviewed by IEC, that is Institutional Ethical Committee. So conforming to the accepted scientific principles, and the design formulation should be reviewed by the Institutional Ethical Committee. Then the experiments to be conducted by qualified and trained persons. Importance in proportion to inherent risk. A thorough assessment of risk versus benefit. See, we are discussing about the basic principles that has been given in the Declaration of Helsinki. The experimental design or the formulation should conform to the accepted scientific principles, should be thoroughly reviewed by IEC, and it should be conducted by qualified and trained persons. Importance in proportion to inherent risk. A thorough assessment of the risks versus benefits. Safeguard the privacy of the subject, that is subject's integrity. Decline or abstain unless hazards are predictable. So you should be able to predict the hazardous effect. If not, abstain or decline. Decline unless hazards are predictable. Preserve accuracy when publishing the results. Adequately inform or right to withdraw. Obtain true informed consent in writing. Very much important. True informed consent in writing is mandatory. Trust on the legal guardian or the reliance on legal guardian. State the compliance with declaration, that is the conform with declaration. So these are the basic principles of Declaration of Helsinki. Most of them are similar to the Nuremberg Code. Okay? Certain virtues are there in the ethical principles. Nowadays, there is a lot of momentum regarding the ethical principles. Even if you want to perform a small experiment, you need to justify its rightness or wrongness. There is a requirement to justify whether the experimental work that is designed to carry out is right or wrong. That means its rightness or wrongness needs to be justified. So before starting any new experiment, the ethical issues will depend upon the following. Number one, the consequences. Now, what does this mean? What are the questions to be answered under consequences? So if you want to perform any experiment, whether it is a small experiment or a big experiment, you need to justify its rightness or wrongness. And then you should be able to answer all the queries which we are discussing now, in order to justify the rightness or wrongness of the experiment formulated or designed. First one is consequences. How to understand the consequences? What questions need to be answered under these consequences? What would be effect of this experiment? Who is going to be benefited? See, there are several questions under each virtues. Under consequences, we need to justify what would be the effect of the experiment designed or formulated. Who is going to be benefited? What would be harms associated with this type of work? Got it? Second virtue is the rights and responsibilities. What do we try to understand under rights and responsibilities? Are we exploiting somebody else's rights? Need not always be a human. It applies to animals too. Are we exploiting somebody else's rights? Do those rights need protection? So we are discussing what are the possible justifications that has to be provided under rights and responsibilities virtue of ethical principles. Are we exploiting somebody else's rights? Do those rights need protection? Who would protect these if they require protection? So all these questions needs to be justified under rights and responsibilities. The third one is autonomy. To what extent the autonomy is? If one feels it is right, should things move on? Or else someone feels it is wrong, should things stop? See, if I feel as a researcher in an experimental group working with some 10 people, if I feel yes, this methodology is right, should things move on? If any other person in my group feels no, it is wrong, then should things stop? Who has the autonomy to decide should things move on or should things stop? Alternatively, who would decide things should be or should not be? There should be clarity on the autonomy before starting any experiment. So autonomy is very, very important. If one feels right, should we take it forward? Or else someone feels wrong, should we stop in between? Who would decide to carry forward or stop? It all speaks about the autonomy, right? So these are some of the virtues: consequences, rights and responsibilities, autonomy. Next, the virtue ethics. We should be in a position to decide, is this the best thing to do and what is good about it? Next is animal rights. Are we authorized to use animals the way we want? This is a big question. Since animals are the experimental animals, can we use these experimental animals the way we want? Are we authorized to do so? We all know that they too can think. They are aware of their family members. They too feel the pain, maybe at different levels. And they are alive. So these guidelines are not only for humans. Animal rights is equally important. Can we use the animals the way we want? In spite of knowing that they too can think and they are aware of their family members, they do feel, and most important is they are alive. So a lot of justification has to be provided for all these virtues under ethical principles. Is that clear? There are different strata of ethics. We have environmental ethics, then religious ethics, medical ethics is there, and then philosophical ethics. See, one experiment need not involve all these strata of ethics. Need not always involve all these ethics. But we need to address all of these if our experimental design or formulation demands. The environmental ethics, religious ethics, medical ethics, philosophical ethics. Philosophical ethics is divided into descriptive ethics and normative ethics. So I thought I'll just give a single line definition for descriptive ethics and normative ethics, because these are new terminologies. You can understand what is environmental ethics, religious ethics, medical ethics and philosophical ethics, but to understand better about philosophical ethics, it is divided into descriptive ethics and normative ethics. So I thought I'll give some more information about descriptive ethics and normative ethics. Descriptive philosophical ethics explains the actual moral viewpoints of the people through opinion polls or questionnaire evaluations. So what happens? You build a consensus of the view of the people. So outcome is it gives an accurate estimation of people's ethics. Got it? So the actual moral viewpoints as obtained through opinion polls or questionnaire evaluation to build a consensus of the views of the people, so that an accurate estimation of the people's ethics can be obtained. This is descriptive philosophical ethics. Now, what is normative philosophical ethics? It explains the viewpoint which people should have. It speaks about the action, what should be done. So that a proper guidance is available in difficult situations. So this speaks about the action. What are the viewpoint which people should have, So this is normative philosophical ethics. Descriptive philosophical ethics speaks about opinion polls or questionnaire evaluations. Normative philosophical ethics speaks about the action of people ethics, that is what should be done. Right? So moving further, we have ethical issues at various stages or types of researches. To begin with, I would like to mention about ethical issues in transgenic animal production. The moment we use the word transgenic, it sparks controversy. Some groups, they understand that generation of these GMOs are an interference to the natural biological processes. That means, if you start generating the genetically modified organisms, they see it as interfering with natural biological states or processes. Few other groups, they are concerned with the limitation of modern science to fully comprehend the potential negative ramification. That means they say the modern science is not capable enough to understand the potential negative effect and unforeseen possible effects of genetic manipulation. So the term limitation, that means the knowledge is limited. The modern science does not have a full knowledge, a complete knowledge to understand the potential negative ramification and unforeseen possible effects of genetic manipulation. Right? So, few people say that the GMOs interfere with the natural processes, and few other people say there is limited knowledge to understand the negative ramification of the genetic manipulation. Okay? And in 2001, the Royal Society concluded in its report by saying that the use of genetically modified animals, that is, the use of transgenic animals, is fundamentally little different from the use of other animals in biomedical research. So there is a very little difference from the use of other animals in biomedical research. Not much of different, very little different. So these transgenic animals are little different from the use of other animals in biomedical research. Okay? However, the technology has provided new opportunities to explore the organization, the biological pathway, the regulatory mechanisms, the pathological functions of molecular processes, and has opened up new frontiers in biomedical applications, in spite of these controversies. Right? Moving further, it's about bioethics and genetically modified crops. In the previous slides, we discussed about transgenic animals. Now, we'll try to understand the bioethics of the genetically modified crops. The GM crops have given new dimensions to agriculture. The agricultural productivity is increased, the nutritive value of the food is enhanced, there is less requirement for the use of pesticides and insecticides, that means greatly reduced. And vaccines, the pharmaceutical substances, the vaccines are being produced in the plants. A totally new dimension in the field of agriculture. What is expected? Agriculture productivity is increased, nutritive value of the food is enhanced, requirement of pesticides and insecticides is reduced, greatly reduced, and the vaccines are being produced in the plants. However, there is a public concern due to unknown and unseen fears of their effects on the ecosystem, and in turn risk to the human health. Unknown and unseen fears of their effects, that is the GM crops, on the ecosystem and risks to the human health. And there are economic and societal issues associated with GM crops. What are those? I have mentioned very few. The manipulated seeds can only be afforded by big farmers and landowners. The impact of this is it negatively affects small scale farmers. Second thing is the farmers need to buy these seeds every year, as they cannot be collected, stored and replanted. This is another issue. And there would be huge difference in the farming practices in one country only. If a country starts growing maize, and if it harvests the larger quantity it produces, then probably it will affect the other countries who are growing maize but not utilizing the biotechnologically manipulated seeds. That will affect the other nations. So the gap would be widened between developed and developing nations. And last issue is GM food is not labeled. Thus, public trust and acceptance of GM food would be a big challenge. So these are some of the important economical and societal issues associated with the GM crops and foods. The ethical concerns are the impact of breeding of these transgenic animals and plants on other plants and animals. So when they breed in their natural environment. So what is the impact of breeding of transgenic animals and plants versus non-transgenic? The risk of transmission or emergence of potential pathogens post gene manipulation, and changes in the environment and ecology of unnatural gene transfer, and potential health hazards which we can face after consumption of GMOs. Thus, there is a requirement of well-defined guidelines when using gene manipulations as well as labeling of the products produced by such gene transfer technologies. Is that clear? So I'll stop over here for today's session. We can continue it in the next session. Thank you, one and all.